There's been a lot of news stories and media hype around authors selling directly in the digital age, particularly with Amazon and the Kindle. You would have all seen a lot of news stories about successful authors who've gone out on their own, bypassed the traditional publishing model and made small fortunes and done very well for themselves. So this question was trying to tap into that, whether publishers and authors think that will become a major trend. It's interesting, 43% of publishers do think that this will become a major trend, and the second most common response was that it'll continue to happen, but only for niche authors, and then some thinking it will happen but for established authors. So clearly publishers think that that is a trend that's going to continue into the future, and I was a bit surprised by that result too. In terms of authors, they think much the same thing. I would have thought they'd think it a lot more strongly, but they don't. They think it, I think, sort of, if you flick between the two, it's sort of pretty similar to what publishers think. So the majority think it will become a major trend, and some are more inclined to think it's only for niche. Reading devices. You all, I'm sure, have noticed the explosion in the last 2 years in particular of reading devices. The big ones are the Kindle and the iPad. I think they're the two biggest by far. In this question, we asked, do you personally use any of the following e-reading devices? In retrospect, hindsight's 2020, but we should have been clearer here and we should have said, do you use them to read e-books or to read long-form prose? We've made a bit of a mistake there, because I'd be very surprised if over 50% of people use their smartphone to read. I'm sure a lot do, but I don't think it's more than 50%. So I'd really just concentrate here more on the results for the Kindle and the iPad. This was an optional question, so there was so roughly 1,300 people who did answer that question. So of that 1,300, 20% said they use a Kindle and 30% said they use an iPad. The iPad I was not at all surprised about. You know, it's very easily available in Australia. We all know it's virtually been sold out the day it was released. But the Kindle I was very surprised about. I thought that 20% was very high. That means there's a lot of people using Kindles. And considering there's, you know, certain barriers to using a Kindle, you have to buy it from Amazon, you have to buy it from the US, you have to have a credit card, there's a certain amount of hurdles you have to jump over, whereas an iPad, it's easy just to go down to your local shops and buy one. So I was surprised that that many people are using Kindles. This question was also redrafted about 50 times and didn't get any clearer with each redrafting. It was a bit confusing, but what we were trying to get at here was clearly there's going to be convergence factors and important factors that are going to really kick off digital publishing in the next 5 years. And of the things currently in the marketplace, which of those do you think is the most important? You can see there was a large grouping towards them all being somewhat important, and the one standout was Apple and its iPad. So clearly the people who answered this survey think that the iPad is a big deal. They love the colour screen and the form factor, etc. But not too far behind Amazon and its Kindle and Google and its ebook services. And some of these, some of us in the office were expecting may have been a bit lower, because everyone was quite sort of positive about all of these factors. You know, you had others, can you read it there? There's other online retailers, the NBN, smartphones, bricks and mortar bookshops, libraries lending digital content, the digital education revolution, and DRM and digital identifiers. So generally everyone thought, well, everything's quite important, and it's really the iPad at the moment that's the standout. This is a question that gets sillier and sillier the more times you ask it, but we can't help ourselves from asking it. When is digital going to overtake print? You would have seen the media stories recently with Amazon that finally for them, they do now sell more digital content through the Kindle than they do through print. So we couldn't help but ask the question, when do you think digital sales will overtake print for the Australian publishing industry as a whole? I think one thing we did differently was we did have this option of saying it's too hard to predict, and clearly most people fell into that category, 28.7%. So most people have given up trying to predict when it's going to happen. They just assume it will one day. But there is a bit of a bunching around, 4 to 5 years onwards. So it's probably not something in the next 5 years, but, keep an eye out after that. Then lastly, we asked one open-ended question. And I think I've got the actual question here. So it was, do you have any other comments on the survey, your experiences, or the future of digital publishing? So it was deliberately open-ended just to get all sorts of feedback, and we certainly got all sorts of feedback. 650 people answered the question, and they ranged from people who just did one sentence to people who did multiple paragraphs and everywhere in between. Most people sort of did about 2 to 3 paragraphs. We're currently going through all of that data and looking at how we can categorise it and how we can best report on it. So we'll probably come up with themes of the main things that people were talking about, and we'll report on those rather than individual responses. There was a very diverse range of opinions and all sorts of experiences as well. And we were surprised by the overwhelming response. This was the last question. It was quite a long questionnaire. People would have been pretty tired by the end, but still they were keen to voice their opinion and tell us what they thought. So there was clearly a lot of interest and a lot of passion on this topic. But I will give you a little look at some of the short and sweet answers. These will progress from generally being a digital skeptic towards being a digital evangelist. So as a lover of actual books, I find the virtual book revolution sad and threatening. E-books will never outsell paper. As an author-publisher of nautical books, I'm concerned with the future of my lifetime works and easy access for them to be pirated. I'll be sad to see bricks and mortar bookshops go, but I think it's definitely heading that way. This has been quite an illuminating survey. Thank you. Time for me to be more proactive, but how? Just a few more. I'm finding it hard to persuade my publisher to publish e-versions of my books. I'm currently working out how to do it myself. It's here to stay, and we need to embrace it and make it work for authors, sellers, and consumers. No point fighting it and hoping it'll go away. I now no longer read paper books and am a 100% digital reader. It has changed my reading habits in that now I read genres I never would have spent money on buying a traditional book. It's still a pretty defensive attitude to digital publishing here. It's happening, it's huge, it's a game changer. So perhaps more thought needs to go into how to positively adapt. The shift is totally inevitable, even if the timeline is unpredictable. We are moving inexorably towards a globalised world. The question is how we respond to this, not how we resist it. So that's just a bit of a snapshot of some of the responses that we got. As I said, we're going to look at putting these into categories. They'll be a bit more formal than the ones I've listed here, but this does give you a sense of the sort of camps that people fell into. There were people who said, oh, this digital stuff's never going to catch on, or they don't want it to catch on. The balanced viewpoint, people who sort of saw both sides of the argument. There was a lot of frustration. There were a lot of people who were confused, didn't know which technology to go to or who to approach in terms of getting their stuff published. There was authors who had issues with their publisher or their publisher not being particularly helpful when it came to digital. There were rights issues and confusion about rights in the digital age. There were people who were feeling threatened or confused and needed help. There were people who said this is just inevitable, it's going to happen no matter what we do. Similar to that, people saying, what's all the fuss about? Let's move on, it's just going to happen, we have to adapt. And people who were saying, just bring it on. And lastly, there was quite a big chunk which I was interested by who were the digital convert. I think they're people who would have been skeptics in the past, but really were converted and largely due or thanks to the Kindle. And I'll just give you one or two quick examples of these. So just read the first part. It's my 83-year-old mother just bought a Kindle before me, along with a large cohort of her retired and ageing friends. They are all talking Kindle and e-books and the fact they are sick of packing up dozens of boxes of books when they downsize or move house. The retired baby boomers and 70-year-olds are incredibly mobile and travel often. My mother is now a whiz at Amazon and uploading books ahead of a 2-month trip to Europe. She says she's never lugging around a conventional book on planes again, just her Kindle, etc. So I think one of the big misconceptions with digital and digital publishing is that it's all about Gen Y and young people, and it's really not. It's all about people who read books, and they're the ones who are buying Kindles and they're the ones who are reading books on Kindles. So whatever the demographic is that are reading books, they're the ones who are getting into digital publishing, digital reading. And yeah, there's some similar ones there. The second one here, I work in an office of about 40 people and I know at least 10 with Kindles and all purchase their books online from Amazon. In my own case, I'm purchasing an averaging of 3 books per month. This compares with no more than 3 or 4 paper books per year prior to getting my Kindle. My Kindle has reintroduced me to reading and I love it. So I'm by no means a Kindle salesman here, but I'm just pointing out that I was struck the amount of responses we got that directly related to the Kindle, and people who said, I didn't believe in this digital publishing stuff until I saw someone else had a Kindle. I said, what's that? And then I went straight out and bought one and haven't turned back since.